Hello, welcome, We Are Centered CEOs. It's Angie Rice. I'm here to talk about rejection. This is, a difficult topic for many people. Rejection is something that oftentimes we premeditate. We expect rejection, and that's part of the reason why rejection repeats itself. I think it's really important to learn how to overcome rejection so that we can avoid it as much as possible. We have to learn how to overcome it, and we have to learn how to deal with it. Rejection is something that happens in our business and it happens in our personal life. And we learn about rejection as children. I can recall some of the first times I really dealt with rejection. When you're trying out for a sport, thinking you're going to make it and find out you don't make it. And, it's heartbreaking. And at that point in your life as a kid, it seems like it's the worst thing in the world. Also, as we become into the adolescent phase, we experience, rejection for the first time as it relates to dating. I have a 15-year-old, and I know that's it hasn't happened yet, but I know that's on the horizon. It's that notion that we have to be vulnerable and open up and try to become attractive to other people in our personal lives at a young age, and it's hard and it's intimidating. And we certainly have to do it in business as well. We have to really work with our clients so that they understand our services and our offerings. And we also have to be open and honest with our clients and our prospects as it relates to our challenges and whether we're not, necessarily equipped to do the job. And I think that's sometimes where rejection takes place, is when we're not open and honest, and we're not presenting ourselves based on truly what skills we bring to the table and what we have to offer. And a lot of times when we're open with our clients to say, hey, look, I've never had that type of project before, or that's something a little bit different than the types of services that we usually provide. However, we really want to work with you because this is a great opportunity for us. And clients are oftentimes extremely receptive to that honesty, to be able to say, I haven't worked on a project like this before, but let's work on it together. Or you're having a conversation with a client and they're asking you about your expertise, and they touch on some subject matters that are a little outside your wheelhouse. It's okay to say, I'm very familiar with these aspects. However, specifically to what you're asking, I would have to do more research, or maybe it's I have to rely on my partner or my team members to really bring me up to speed on that area of importance to you. We're going to need more time. Those open dialogues that you have with clients as well as individuals and relationships in your life are so important. It's honesty. People tend to be so forgiving when you're open and honest. So I want to talk to you today about rejection, how you overcome the fear of rejection, and how you deal with it so that you can be successful and you can avoid rejection. Essentially, let's turn no's into a yes. Rejection is something, quite honestly, I just have decided to accept. Maybe it's those experiences that I mentioned early on, whether it's, not making the volleyball team, or putting myself out there as a young teenager and letting a boy know, hey, I really like you, and voila, he doesn't like me back. But what that does is it allows you to, if you stay positive and you deal with that rejection, you continue to pursue the things that you want, the things that are important to you. If you cave to rejection, what's going to happen is that you are going to lower your standards. You are going to take on, you're going to basically accept mediocre. You're going to, instead of going after that ideal client that you want to serve, you're going to accept a client that maybe isn't ideal for you. And we find that in relationships in general, that don't lose sight of what you want. Just figure out a game plan for how you're going to get there. And each experience with rejection is going to get you closer and closer and closer to that ideal situation where you avoid the rejection and you have a positive outcome. I am going to pull up a chart, and as many of you might know, I'm not all that great with technology. So bear with me as I pull up this chart. So we all have strengths and weaknesses. Mine is technology. Okay, so the screen that I've pulled up is just sort of my beliefs as it relates to how you can overcome rejection. These are the things that have really worked for me. The less you worry about it, the more likely you are going to remove that sense of fear. And I would say a perfect example of this is a gymnast. If a gymnast goes out to perform and they're nervous and they're anxious, they might have mistake after mistake. And those judges are going to notice every little detail because they're just off. They're allowing that anxiety and fear to take over. However, if a very, very confident gymnast got up there with the sense of, I am going to do this, I have no fear, and they make one mistake, regardless of how huge, in their routine, I guarantee that's not what the judges are going to focus on. They're going to focus on everything that that person did right, because it was that one mistake, not the entire routine being a mistake. And I think the same happens in business and how we negotiate and how we deal with relationships. We're not going to be perfect, but if 100% of the time, when you deal with, a client, for example, 98% of the time, things run smoothly and you do well. That other 2%, as long as you take ownership, if there's a mistake or a miscommunication, you learn from that, you reduce it, you're going to be able to continue to have a positive relationship with that client. However, if there's a little sense of worry, mishap each and every time you interface with that client because your confidence is low and you're afraid of that rejection, they will see that sense of fear and things just won't be quite right. So just overcome the worry so that you can perform at your best. And I also think focus on how you want to feel. Like if you are in a situation where there's a probability of rejection, and we know those situations, anytime you're working with a client for the first time, or you have a big project that you're working on that needs to be signed off, it's important to set the stage for how you want that experience to feel for you. If you allow your feelings to be of if you allow yourself to feel overwhelmed, if you allow yourself to feel overworked, because a lot of times, prior to, a big deadline where you're facing, some sort of outcome where a client has to make a yes or no decision, you might be working up towards that deadline to offer that RFP response. And so I think it's important that you recognize how you want to feel and envision, and we kind of get into the next step. I think it's a two-step process because we're talking about all of those things to prepare you for how to deal with rejection. This is kind of the assumption that there will be rejection. There's always rejection. The very most successful people deal with rejection. And so you have to envision the positive outcomes. I think sometimes we focus on the negativity and we allow that negativity to take over, that what if this happens? What if that happens? Instead of focusing all of the things that have to fall into place in order to achieve that positive outcome. So if you're focusing on all the things that go wrong, you're essentially focusing your attention on the negative things. And by doing that, you're failing to focus on the positive things and what needs to happen in order for the outcome to be positive. I think, a perfect example, when, a medical team is going in to perform surgery, they're focused on doing the job correctly. They're not focused on the things that go wrong. They address the things that go wrong when they happen. They don't try to premeditate them. It's really important that your focus is on imagine the positivity, so that when you are going through each and every step, your energy is focused on the things that you're supposed to be doing. And it just allows you to naturally perform at your best. Similarly to the example that I gave of the gymnast, if they're naturally focused on doing everything right, there's so many steps that go into that process, and there's so many opportunities for error by all means. But if you're focused on doing everything correctly, you're not going to be disrupted or distracted by those many of things that could go wrong. And then it's really that moment when you deal with that direction. I mean, that's another opportunity, if not one of the most important opportunities, to say, hey, I'm not going to let this rejection get the better of me. And you have to really recognize that the person that is rejecting you, or the business that's rejecting you, or whatever's rejecting you, that is not necessarily indicative of why you're being rejected. It's not necessarily indicative of anything you've done wrong. There's so many variables as to why that person or business rejected you. It could be that they are not as knowledgeable as you. It could be that they are intimidated, or and that they are afraid to make the investment, whether it's an investment, whether it's a financial investment or an investment of time. So I think it's really important for you to, in advance, really be prepared to know what rejections you are most likely to be faced. What are you likely to face? So if you know what rejections are probable, you can work with the person that you're interfacing with, the decision maker, to let them know you're aware of those rejections, that hey, you might be worried about costs. Let's talk about it in advance. Premeditate the very reasons why you might be rejected. If you believe that the rejecter isn't as knowledgeable as they should be as it relates to making the decision that needs to be made, help educate them on the very reasons and the value that you will be providing them, so that they are better equipped to actually make a decision. And be mindful of when you face when you approach a situation that may have a higher level of rejection. Part of that rejection might be that the person that you're interfacing with is just not ready to make a decision. So I think you need to kind of have a message that really helps prepare people for the decision-making process, so that they are more likely to be accepting and ready to accept, okay, I realize that there are some obstacles and challenges, but if you can overcome the fear, those obstacles and rejections, your client or the person you're relating with is likely to overcome them as well. And then it's this notion of believing in yourself. I think that's being able to walk away from rejection and being able to walk away from it in a way that you learn and you grow. So now we're going to really move on. I have a second slide. And really talk about how we deal with rejection once we've been rejected. And I think the very first thing to do is that moment of shock. I mean, it does have, rejection has that shock value for sure. And you have to be able to say, okay, I've been rejected. Let's just step away from it. And maybe that's putting it aside and doing something fun. Maybe it's ending your workday early and meeting up with your friends, or making arrangements with your family. Just like step away from it altogether and forget about it. I mean, you're not going to forget about it indefinitely, but forget about it for the moment, so that when you go back to it, you're not addressing the rejection at the same time you're feeling anxious and overwhelmed. You want to deal with the rejection when you're in a better place. So step away from it. And then when you're ready to revisit the rejection, you have to analyze it. What went wrong? Why was I rejected? Who rejected me? Get an understanding of why the person may have rejected you. What is their situation? I mean, I can say it again and again. Most of the time when you're rejected, it has nothing to do with you, but it has more to do with the person that's rejecting you. So understand that, because what that's going to help you do is it's going to help you when you're in a similar situation. Before you arrive to that situation, you can better prepare for the rejection, or you might even altogether avoid the rejection, knowing that the probability is so high that you want to move in a different direction, and it's a situation that you want to avoid altogether. So there's so much you can learn if you analyze the rejection after it's happened. And then you learn and grow. You really can look at the situation and say, okay, maybe I didn't provide adequate information to really help somebody, turn a no into a yes. And I guess sometimes it's turning a no into a yes sometimes it's a yes that turns into a no. So you really have to evaluate what happened from the time that you started the negotiations that were taking place to how the outcome was determined. And from that, you can really learn and grow. It could be that you are a good fit to work with another business, but your delivery in terms of what you were offering weren't quite in line with what that business needed. Maybe it was more in your messaging and your delivering, and maybe it goes back to the presentation, and maybe you were anxious, maybe you weren't confident enough to really offer the influence that was necessary for someone to make that decision of a yes. So learning and growing in terms of how you communicate in a situation that results in either a yes or a no is it's very important. And a lot of us have the products and services that our clients need, that businesses need, but we may not necessarily know exactly how to communicate, or we might not be confident in selling. And so as a result of that, we avoid the situations that lead to rejection. We wait for sales to happen. Well, sales do not happen on their own. You have to initiate them. And as part of that initiation process, what's the beauty of it is that as you analyze rejection, you are going to learn and grow so that you can be better equipped to direct your sales efforts to clients and businesses that are more likely to not reject you or not reject your business. And so your conversion rate is going to go substantially higher as you improve your pitch and you improve sort of how you interface and deal with rejection. And then, of course, there's always other opportunities. So that's anytime you're dealing with rejection, you always have to acknowledge, I want to learn from it, but that's not the only opportunity. There's so many other opportunities out there. And one of the other things to really recognize is when you're dealing with rejection, we talked about how it could be the person who's rejecting you is just not quite ready to make a decision. So it's important to leave a positive note as it relates to opportunities to work together at another time. Or maybe it's reinventing your services and your products over time where you're able to nurture that relationship with a prospect so that there is that buying opportunity just at a later date. So it's really important that you collect all of the information that may have caused the rejection to occur, and also create a means to use that information to create opportunities in the future. And I also think when you look at your data and you analyze what situations ended in rejection and which situations ended in a positive result, and you'll start to see correlations that are important. And so that's a way to really shift away from being rejected and shifting to more positive outcomes. And again, it's that staying positive, because nobody wants to be around negativity. That's your team, that's your clients, it's the people you serve. When you stay positive and you exude positivity, it allows you to deal with rejection so much easier because you're prepared to learn from it. Basically, you're acknowledging that there's positivity with rejection. There's always something positive that can come out of a negative situation. And obviously, for most people, we view rejection as a negative experience. So I think if you can incorporate this process, and I think it really is a process, starting with once you're in a situation where you're being rejected, step away from it. And then when you're ready to deal with it and deal with it in a more of a very objective type matter, analyze it. What went wrong? What went right? What could have been done differently? And kind of really assess your role in the process versus the role of the rejecter. And then learning and growing so that in the future, we pursue less opportunities that would otherwise lead to rejection and more opportunities that are likely to lead to a yes. And then throughout that process, we need to stay positive. We need to be positive on the front end when we are anticipating a percentage of or a likelihood of rejection. And really any sales type situation has a probability of rejection. That's just how business works. And so stay positive as you on the front end. And when you're accepting someone's rejection, that's also a great opportunity to stay positive, because when you stay positive during the rejection phase, it allows the rejecter to kind of say, okay, wait, this person is positive. Why they're positive? I mean, it really gives them some reason to think about why you're able to handle that rejection. And it allows them probably to leave on a positive note, so that when they think of you or they think of your business, they think of it in a positive vantage, in a positive light. So whether it's a situation where you're being rejected by a current client who no longer wants to do business with you, or you're being rejected by a prospect, always try to end the closure of those situations very positively, because you never know when those doors might reopen, where that client may, oftentimes you hear of businesses where they lose a client, but that client recognizes, you know what, nothing's perfect, and they go and try to work with one of your competitors, whether it's 6 months, a year from now, or even 2, then they start to have that envy of working with you again. And so when we leave a situation on a positive note, it allows for those doors to reopen. So I think that's important to recognize, both when you're dealing with prospects as well as you're dealing with clients, because people change, situations change, and you might have to part with a client mutually, but in the future, it might be an opportunity for both parties to learn and grow, and there might be an opportunity to work together again. And really, I kind of want to end the conversation as it relates to rejection with a yes, because rejection is truly how you get to a yes, in terms of if you deal with it and you overcome it and you allow yourself to learn from it, you're going to get to a yes more often, and it's going to happen sooner. And the frequency, like I said, is going to happen more often. So really focus on the staying positive throughout the rejection process. And when you know of people and businesses and team members who deal with positivity better than you, that's an opportunity to emulate their behavior, emulate how they keep that positive attitude, and you'll be much better equipped to deal with rejection. So thanks again for tuning in, and we look forward to growing We Are Centered CEOs. If you have any comments or want to share any stories how you've dealt with and overcame rejection, please share in the comments. Thank you very much.